put her in a nice phenobarbital coma before the DTs kill her.
Where are you going?
To put her in a pheno coma.
I need him to react. I need him to act like a human being. I need him to get over this boring near-death rebirth.
I can 100% relate to what House is saying about Foreman. In a team like this, you need people to speak up when they have a point, as it doesn't matter how junior someone is, they could spot something that saves a patient. Whether it's a medical student or even a cleaner, there should be what's called a flat hierarchy, where it's not just people at the top that dominate the conversation. A case that comes to mind is one of a 50-year-old patient. Very excited to be reacting to House MD Season 2, Episode 22, Forever. On this channel, we are reacting to all 177 House videos. This would be episode 64. Let's see if I can get a diagnosis before House does as a doctor working in London.
Are you all right?
Yeah. Did he sleep okay?
Great, as long as I was holding him. Can't wait for colic to be over.
Honey, I'm not gonna go in.
Cat! Mikey! Mikey!
Good thing he had food poisoning. You have to be so incredibly careful with kids and water. A baby can drown in just 2 inches of water, so they can never be left unsupervised. Of course, this is an insanely unfortunate situation. From the way the guy reacted, it seems like this was the first unresponsive episode from his wife. The way she was looking with the eyes open and rolled back, twitching, blank, no response, makes me think it is a clonic seizure. That's different to a tonic clonic seizure, which is the classic, very dramatic looking seizure where your muscles tense up. There can be a few things that could cause something like this to happen, like a herpes brain infection or sleep deprivation. So let's find out more.
4-week-old infant submerged in a bathtub. Don't know how long.
Obviously breathing now.
Caucasian female, 32. Clonic seizure in the bathroom.
Has your wife had a seizure before?
No.
Dinner with Cuddy.
She asked you?
I'm recently single. She's single.
Glad you're back. His brain, it's not quite where it's supposed to be.
Seizure that can't be explained by epilepsy and accompanied by elevated calcium levels.
So much to go through here. Foreman had a very close shave with death as he got a brain infection and almost died, but was saved by House, technically assaulting him and infecting him with what can only be described as a bioweapon. Whoever thinks of these storylines needs a medal. Now, not only do we have our neurologist back, but we also have another clue. High calcium with the seizure. There are a few conditions that could cause the high calcium in the first place, like a prolactinoma, for example. Prolactin is a hormone released by a gland in your brain, which helps a new mother to produce milk. So if there was a small tumor there after the brain had been stimulated, that could potentially lead to these symptoms. It could also be a cancer or high parathyroid levels or vitamin D toxicity potentially. Would definitely want a set of bloods, including those hormones and an MRI head to start with, and then re-review from there onwards. The signs of high calcium to recognize, we remember as stones, bones, groans, and psychiatric overtones. That's because it causes kidney stones from calcium accumulation. Bones relates to low bone density as the calcium needs to come from somewhere, and a condition called osteitis fibrosa cystica, which can cause pain and fractures, is associated with hypercalcemia. Groans are abdominal discomfort from constipation, nausea, vomiting, or indigestion. Psychiatric overtones could be depression, psychosis, memory loss, seizure, and tiredness potentially. These cases in season 2 are getting so intricate, I need a triple espresso to keep up.
But until you can remember how to make coffee, hands off the patients. Do a digital subtraction angiogram.
Sorry. Cuddy says I'm stuck here.
He asked for the assignment, didn't he?
If Chase needs a break from you, he should take it.
Son's not getting enough oxygen.
Could this family get any more unlucky? The baby's accumulating air in their chest, the mother looks like she needs an exorcist, and Cameron got squirted in the face with blood at Japanese toilet pressures. It does give us some clues though, because what the mother Kara was experiencing is called episiotonis. It's a very rare condition that's caused by a huge spasm of the back muscles. In adults, it's associated with tetanus, brain swelling, poisoning, and drowning. It's actually called the dinosaur death pose because it happens to drown victims, but we've also discovered many fossils of dinosaurs in this position with their head thrown back and an arch all the way through to their tail with their mouth open. What does that mean for our patient? Well, toxic drugs that could do this include lithium for bipolar disorder, metoclopramide for sickness, or haloperidol for psychosis. What about the baby though? Toxicities could be transmitted through breast milk potentially, but that wouldn't cause a buildup of air in the lung. If the dad was a bit too aggressive with CPR breaths though when attempting to revive him after finding him drowned, he could have burst part of the lung, causing what we call a barotrauma, and that could cause a leak from the lung into the chest cavity. If that's the case, then you would need a chest drain to keep the lung inflated until that leak between the lung and the chest cavity heals. Barotrauma like that is also really common on ventilators, as a machine may push air into your lungs at pressures higher than it can handle. The child hadn't been on a ventilator yet though, so that's unlikely. I love these double patient episodes, they're always the best. But question for you smart people, at what age do newborns become significantly less vulnerable to infection? Answers down below.
Lithium could cause all three of the mother's symptoms.
Myelomatous meningitis could also cover everything.
Get an SPEP and an MRI for myelomatous meningitis. Search the patient's place for lithium. Baby's lung problem is bacterial and not chemical. Start ECMO.
ECMO is an incredible machine, but once you're on it, then the chances of survival are not good. Why? It's a heart-lung replacement machine, so to be on it, you have to be very unwell. Only 33% of patients on that are alive at 1 year. Also, the child had air in his chest, not total respiratory failure or acute respiratory distress syndrome, and so isn't an indication for ECMO. The tests for the mom include SPEP, which means serum protein electrophoresis, which you can thank a guy called Celiac for. Back in the 1930s, he realized that if you apply current to a fluid, then it will split it based on the fluid's charge. We use it on the plasma part of the blood to separate out and find antibodies that could be caused by a cancer called myeloma. What is myeloma? It's where your antibody factories called plasma cells start reproducing themselves like crazy and causes what we remember as crab symptoms: high calcium, renal failure, anemia, and a protein in the urine called Bence-Jones protein. I think that is highly unlikely, as she doesn't have 3 out of 4 of the supposed symptoms, and it tends to be more common in older men, but this is house, so common is worth about as much as a campaign promise. Give us the clues, Sherlock.
She has a subarachnoid bleed.
Blood workup shows her pro times elevated.
Only mood-altering drug was vodka at the back of a drawer. But tox screen was negative for alcohol.
Mommy quits, she gets the DTs. Put her in a nice phenobarbital coma before the DTs kill her. Where are you going?
To put her in a pheno coma.
I need him to react. I need him to act like a human being. I need him to get over this boring near-death rebirth.
Wow. Now she's an alcoholic and she's in withdrawal? Have they seen alcoholics in withdrawal? They don't just lay quietly after coming off the booze. I had a 45-year-old gentleman who had delirium tremens, which is alcohol withdrawal. They're nauseous, shaky, sweating, have a fast heart rate, and are restless and irritable. In theory, they're right on the tox screen. It could still be negative while she is withdrawing. Putting her in a coma, though, is a massive overreaction. Like someone tickles you and you decide to shoot them in the testicle. Also, I can 100% relate to what House is saying about foreman. In a team like this, you need people to speak up when they have a point, as it doesn't matter how junior someone is, they could spot something that saves a patient. Whether it's a medical student or even a cleaner, there should be what's called a flat hierarchy, where it's not just people at the top that dominate the conversation. A case that comes to mind is one of a 50-year-old patient that was previously well and went into surgery with a ruptured appendix. The operation went well, but after, he started to develop a lot of pain and was put on a morphine infusion. His respiratory rate was now 8 and was needing oxygen after the relatively simple operation, even though his appendix had burst. For reference, a normal respiratory rate should be above 12, so that's a 33% reduction. When the nurse called the doctor concerned about the patient's breathing and whether he had overdosed on the morphine infusion, the doctor responded that the patient was just tired and hung up the phone. The doctor had just done a 16-hour shift and had been woken by the phone call. I understand the pressures in healthcare can be extreme and fatigue can cause any one of us to make bad decisions. If you're so burnt out as a doctor though that you can't acknowledge a professional colleague's concerns, then you definitely need some time out. It's stories like this that make me unsurprised that medical errors are the 3rd leading cause of death in the US, with over 250,000 a year. Other developed countries aren't much better either, with 2.6 million deaths happening across developed countries each year due to medical errors. Only the paranoid survive in this profession.
There's somebody here to see you.
I was so scared.
Turns out she and her husband met in AA.
Where's the baby?
Full breath sounds. Crash cart Debbie, stat!
She must have rolled over on it by mistake.
By mistake! By mistake! This is exactly why dads need to check in on how new mums are feeling very closely after birth. Postnatal psychosis happens in 1% of births where the mother loses touch with reality, starts hearing voices and can hallucinate. This episode was filmed almost 20 years ago, but it's just as relevant today as in early August, a blood cancer doctor named Crystal Cassetta in the US actually shot her baby and then herself at the age of just 40. Now, 1 in 40 homicide cases in the US are of parents that ended their children's life. And in the developed world, almost 4,000 kids are killed by their parents every year. So how can we bring that number down? Because it's such a horrifying stat. First, it's really important that doctors ask how the mother is coping whenever we see them, and particularly at the 6-week check. Giving mothers time to rest, exercise, or do basic things like shower. I heard from a 31-year-old doctor recently that she had such little support from her partner that she couldn't shower for 10 days as managing her baby was impossible alone. Rest is critical as well. I have a 4-month-old baby and it was my wife's birthday last week. I booked for her to go get a full spa treatment and overnight stay in a nice hotel on her own, and I took care of the baby for the night, giving her time to rest. Community is also equally important. There are prenatal training groups you can do which, yes, give you good information about being a parent, but mainly help mums connect with other mums going through the same thing. That support network is so important to help them feel like they have extra people around outside the house. In the UK, this class is called the NCT course, and they have likely similar paid classes in other countries. If you can afford it, then it's a no-brainer to go.
They said Mikey knows.
You hear voices?
Postpartum psychosis makes her want to drown her kid. The internal conflict triggers a seizure.
You know what else might be a trigger? Physical illness.
I'll draw some blood.
You've done it again. Will you argue with me?
Interesting. So we know she has psychosis, and what Foreman is talking about here is that the seizure was caused by a functional cause, which means that there's no physical reason to have it. They're more common than you might expect, as around 13% of people referred to the blackout clinics have these functional seizures. So what causes them if there's no physical reason? Well, it's believed this type of seizure is a response to overwhelming stress, or can be following a type of traumatic incident like abuse or losing a loved one. For some people though, we never find a cause. EEG, which is an electrical trace of the brain, generally is normal in functional seizures. So I'm surprised they haven't done one until now. I once saw a 16-year-old girl who with functional seizures on the pediatric ward. She used to have the seizures at school, and every time they happened, she was sent into the hospital. At this particular occasion, the nurse said, "Time to get the rectal diazepam," and the seizure just stopped. That doesn't mean all people have voluntary control over it, and it may have been just a coincidence, but still very interesting to watch. Now, if you're interested to watch every house reaction, then check out the channel membership. You get priority access to new videos, access to exclusive polls, and to suggest another series and episode for me to react to. The first 30 members have a chance to win a 1-hour one-on-one tutor session with me on a topic of your choice. We have 25 members now with just 5 spots left, so press join now to get your spot. I'll keep working tirelessly to make it worth your while.
What do you want me to do?
Have an original thought. Take her off the haloperidol, hook her up to an EEG, flash some lights, make her pants, shoot her up with a placebo.
Kara, look directly into the light. Because of the damage done to your son's kidneys, his potassium is climbing. I'm doubling the meds and starting him on dialysis. But unless we get his potassium down, he's gonna have a heart attack.
House's conversations with his team always go something like this. Our patient is sick. What should we do? Let's make them sicker. But won't that be dangerous? You know what's dangerous? Death. But you might kill them. Well, I'll definitely kill them if we don't push them to the brink of death and find out what's wrong with them. Okay, I'll make them sicker. Does make for incredible television. Like trying to invoke a seizure in this lady and then checking the EEG trace at the same time. I'll be honest, we don't tend to want to induce seizures, so this seizure lab thing with the flashing lights looks less like a lab and more like an underground techno-rave. What about the child though? It's possible that his kidney failure is due to the difficulties with oxygenation and the mother smothering him, but that doesn't quite make sense. The first organ to be affected by that would be the brain, and surely if that were affected, it would be a much larger priority than the kidneys. The other and more likely option though is the lung infection. If that was caused by bacteria, then the child would easily develop what we call neonatal sepsis, where the infection begins to spread throughout the system, causing a whole body response. As the child is only 4 weeks old, we could take that incredibly seriously, as the immune system only really becomes developed at around the 3-month mark. And what's more urgent than that though is this high potassium level. See, high potassium destabilizes the heart in a few ways. It reduces how long the heart beats for and stops the heart's resting electricity difference with the blood from reaching its normal levels. That can make the heart go into a funny rhythm and even stop. I once met a 48-year-old man who managed to get his potassium high with just Bombay mix. He was eating about 1 kilo a day while driving his taxi, and keep in mind that a normal potassium is between 3.5 and around 5.1 depending on your lab. His was 6.2 with normal kidney function and no other cause. Other foods high in potassium include bananas, tomatoes, french fries, nuts, dried fruit as well. You can still have these, but don't shovel them down like you're hoarding toilet paper in COVID.
She's seizing. Muscle rigidity, involuntary grasping and sucking motions. She's in an encephalopathic delirium.
He's in VFib. Potassium's still too high.
Chase shouldn't be wasting his time in NICU.
Or go retro. Take an old idea, shine it up, add a new symptom. Pellagra.
What? Pellagra? My mistake. I thought we were watching 21st century New Jersey, not 1900s Texas. Pellagra is exceptionally rare in developed countries because it happens in people who have a diet mainly of maize, which is essentially corn. That's because this food traditionally was deficient in vitamin B3, niacin. Now, when maize is prepared, it's processed in a way that fortifies the niacin content, making this a very rare problem. Another reason why it's a tough one to get is the constellation of symptoms. Pellagra usually causes the 4 Ds, diarrhea, dermatitis, dementia, and death. Not quite the Ds you were thinking of, were they? If it is that, then give the woman some vitamins and send her on her merry way with her son, although you'd probably want to make sure the intrusive thoughts are less Jack the Ripper and more Mr. Beast.
The son just died. You tried to suffocate your son.
Yeah, you stop me.
His son's organs were damaged too severely. He passed away this morning.
Oh, no.
Even if there were a physical reason or you were in acute psychosis, how could anyone live knowing they ended the life of their own child? There would also be legal implication involved, as this would be classified as infanticide. It is both a crime and a defense in itself, as otherwise it would be murder. Infanticide can apply when a woman, by any willful act or omission, causes the death of a child who's aged under 12 months. At the time of the act or omission, the balance of the mind has to be disturbed by reason of her not having fully recovered from the effect of giving birth to the child. That means that the charge is reduced to manslaughter rather than murder, which means killing someone by accident rather than on purpose. The sentence for that could be life imprisonment, but in reality with cases like this, the mother just gets a non-custodial sentence. That means they're subject to complying with a particular treatment plan or hospital order. But now it seems like some of her symptoms improved, but she's still vomiting blood, which isn't characteristic of pellagra. Cameron earlier suggested Whipple's disease, which is a multi-system bacterial infection that can interfere with the body's metabolisms of fat. It can cause neurological symptoms with high calcium and GI bleeding. That's my third and final diagnostic guess. To diagnose it, you need an intestinal biopsy, which would show foamy macrophages in the bowel. Let's find out.
I need your son. If I biopsy her intestines, she'll bleed out. He obviously won't.
God of compassion, take Michael into your arms, and there'll be no sorrow. I'm sorry.
I honestly don't know what's worse, doing a procedure on a living or a non-living baby. Interesting for Chase to show some of his Christian background here, as he did go to seminary school before med school. Nice to know that he still remembers some of what he learned before getting kicked out for sleeping with the groundskeeper's wife. So what could they learn from this? Well, Whipple's disease is diagnosed by an intestinal biopsy and could cause all the patient and baby's symptoms. I hope I'm right because then they can treat the wife. I still find it crazy how a woman killed her baby in real life just a couple of weeks ago, and now I'm reacting to this filmed 20 years ago.
Cuddy's negative for all cancer markers.
Baby's intestines show slight villus atrophy.
Wheat gluten.
It's great stuff, unless your body can't tolerate it.
Colic, he had celiac disease?
Just like mom. They couldn't absorb enough niacin, it caused the pellagra. Couldn't absorb vitamin K, it caused the bleeding.
Celiac disease? Celiac disease? I can't believe I missed that, but in all fairness, the signs weren't easy. House got it because Chase was giving the child polystyrene to try and soak up all the potassium, but it wasn't getting absorbed from the child's gut, even though he was giving as much as he could. If they said, though, the patient had severe diarrhea, bloating with excessive wind, especially after eating pasta, then it'd be too obvious, but could have at least given less subtle signs like iron deficiency or anemia, maybe even tiredness. Insane diagnosis, I swear I had zero chance. Easy cure though, gluten-free menu and she's cured. In the Western world, around 1% of people have celiac disease. A notable person with it is Novak Djokovic. The test reportedly that was done on Djokovic was the doctor asking him to put one hand up and resisting the doctor pushing him, and then pushed a slice of bread against Djokovic's stomach and pushed his arm down easily, finding his kryptonite. That is a validated medical test, by the way, although it doesn't really have that great of a sensitivity. After he figured out he had celiac disease, he began dominating his tennis game as it was clearly holding him back.
Celiac patients are susceptible to cancer of the stomach lining. She has malt lymphoma.
Well, estrogen is too high. You're on fertility meds.
I was considering a donation.
I don't want to live.
You have to change your mind. You can't just walk away.
So you killed your baby. Shake it off. Think positive. At least you're alive.
When you see Mikey, tell him Dad says he's sorry.
Oh man, this episode is heavy. I mean, it's hard to imagine wanting to live after doing something like that to your child, but it wasn't her fault necessarily. Absolutely crazy episode. I'm gonna say 6.5 out of 10 entertainment, 6 out of 10 accuracy, 6 out of 10 diagnosis. You can't finish on a sad note, and this episode only makes sense when you watch a previous one where a teen's romance gets her in hot water. Here